allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Roll call.
Hartwell,
Yes.
Addo,
Here.
Mr. Kelly,
Here.
Durbin,
Here.
Keaton,
Here.
Ronnie, here, Whistler, here.
Thank you. Council has been in a meeting for 2 hours with a 3.5-minute break. So, please give them a little leeway as they might enjoy a snack. First thing, mayor's comments. The city has formed a short-term advisory committee to gather information about the status of our short-term rentals in the community. And the first meeting is going to be this Thursday, September 29th at 5:30. These meetings are posted. I believe they're online, and you're all more than welcome to come. They should be very informative. So if you have any comments that might help gather information, I'm sure they would love to hear them. The second item that we have is department head split updates, but it looks like both of our department heads have left the room. But we can come back to them if they're not back before I'm done speaking. But overall, we don't have a lot of updates. We're waiting on the studies and the information to come back and the decisions of what is recommended to be done. There's hydrology studies going on. There's scour studies to find out how things have been affected. And when we get that information, we will ensure that we post it and we'll talk about it at our council meeting. The third item is that we, as you may or may not know, the Urban Renewal District Committee should have 5 to 7 members. 4 people have applied and they have been named to be on the committee. We're still short 1, but we have got 1 letter of interest until we name that those next 1 or however many people. It remains open, so if you know anybody who would be interested in applying to be on the Urban Renewal District, then please tell them to submit a letter or submit a letter yourself. And with that, we'll move into public comments and we'll try to pick up the department heads and their updates when they return. So is there any comments from the public? Anybody who would like to approach the podium and speak on anything on or off the agenda? Please limit your comments to 3 minutes. Introduce yourself with your address, and do we have anybody who would like to speak on anything? Is there anyone online who would like to speak? Oh, Bill, come on up.
Bill Bullock, 900 Kainu Avenue, Red Lodge. And I'm sorry, my hearing has been impacted by something. Anyway, I had the opportunity to sit and visit with the folks at the Island of Rock Creek a couple of weeks ago and trying to get some movement on their issues in regards to what's going on with the creek. And I just I'm wondering if you guys, as a governing body with the county, if we would host just kind of an informal update. There's not a lot to update other than, I think you kind of already mentioned some of the things, the hydrological studies and the like. But I think even letting folks know that we're not getting a lot of feedback. I don't know if you guys have more going on than we do or something different, but I think that a collective sharing of some of the commiseration that we're going through right now might be worthwhile, given the contact we've had with our congressional delegation and the like. I'm almost wondering if it wouldn't be worthwhile to have more of a community outreach and citizens trying to contact them as well, trying to get some movement forward, because in my view, the way things sit right now, we're not being set up for a very successful springtime. And kind of, we are running out of time to get things done before everything freezes up. I don't know what kind of traction we're gonna get or have, but, I would throw that out to you guys to discuss, talk about, see if there's something we can maybe set up. I think if nothing else, we can say, well, we're going through the same thing as somebody else, so that they don't feel isolated. Just a thought.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anybody else, who'd like to make a comment in the room or online? Is there anybody online who'd like to make a comment? Thank you. Public comment is now closed. I'd like to go back to, any updates on, dealings with the flood from Courtney.
Yeah, sorry, I was holding a gentleman. So the DNRC included in the packet is some materials that the DNRC dropped off last week because they are officially moving forward with updating the floodplain mapping again. So they will plan to start in October with LiDAR, and so they need to, the best time to do LiDAR is when there aren't leaves on the trees, the weather has to be right, so they have a very limited time that they can fly their drones. So it will be a pretty lengthy process. It was a lengthy process last time, but at least we might be able to get to a point that we can have information about the state of Rock Creek, where some mitigation efforts should be focused, and really more of that long-term recovery and planning that I know a lot of people, would like to see happening now, but without knowing what's going on in Rock Creek. Due to the changes from the flood, there's a lot of work being done in Rock Creek with riprap to stabilize banks that's unpermitted, so that also inhibits my ability to know, what it's going to look like next spring runoff when things are going on that aren't permitted. So I've been working a lot with trying to let property owners know the permitting process and how to go about that, because that's a huge part. If we aren't working under a cohesive plan and we're all trying to do our own thing to protect our properties, what we do on one property might affect another, and that might exacerbate issues with future, even with normal spring runoff. Army Corps of Engineers showed up today. They are also doing their own surveys of Rock Creek. So they've been working on getting permission from property owners to access Rock Creek for their surveys as well. So it's a little bit separate from what the DNRC is going to be working on. But any data at this point will be helpful moving forward. It's going to be a long recovery process. It's going to be very frustrating for city, county, private property owners, but there's these steps that unfortunately take a long time before we can make a lot of decisions and apply for grants and to have this data so that we can get mitigation funding.
Thank you. Jim, do you have any updates? You had some good news on one of the water lines.
Well, we got the boring done on the 19th Street Bridge. We're working on getting that line hooked back and those people back off it. We've got to get them off temporary water for the next couple weeks, but it's looking good. They're making the connections on the west side. We'll do the east side, and we've got all the pipe in the ground. It's a matter of getting that connections done, and so pretty favorable. We'll have them back on the water system before the freeze up, and that's our main goal on that one. We're still working on permitting on some of the 9th Street Bridge area. We've got to do some work on before spring, so but that can be done, even after freezing, we can do some work there, but that's where we're at. The same thing he said, it's very frustrating to work with trying to get some answers and get things done, because there's a lot of mitigation needs to happen to get things put to a better situation than they are right now.
Thank you, Jim. So if anybody has any, there's 1,000 different questions that I think a person could ask. And if anybody has a question, they're more than welcome to call City Hall, and we can point you in the right direction of who would be the best person to speak to. And if we don't have the answer, we'll try and get the answers. But as you can tell, we still don't have a lot of answers. It just, as Courtney said, it takes a long time for them to gather the information, and then they need to put it together to make their recommendations. So they're working on it on the county level. We're working on it in the city level, and we'll be sure to provide you with the information as soon as we have some information to provide. Or as Bill mentioned earlier, we might ask for your support in, trying to get the attention of people if we're not getting the information that we need. So that's the flood update.
Comment?
Yes, what?
So I just want to reiterate that I support what Bill said earlier, some sort of a town hall type meeting where all the people that were affected by the flood directly or indirectly could attend and ask questions and commiserate to some degree. So I do believe that maybe it's the time now to let people know what the status is, and if there's anything that we can do as a call to action and support what Bill is doing or what the city is doing. I think this would be a great opportunity because I know there's a lot of people that are frustrated that just don't know what they should do to support the effort. So I'd like to volunteer my time to help secure a venue for Bill and do
For
whatever.
us.
For whatever. But for whatever, to do a town hall or whatever would meet with his schedule or whoever else the city council or you think would be important to have at that meeting. So I'm glad to do that.
Thank you, Terry, and be assured that we will be continuing conversations with county officials and city officials, and when that period is appropriate, we'll make sure that we have that conversation. Thank you. Next up is old business, and there isn't any. We go on to new business. Resolution 3615, the budget amendment for fiscal year 21-22. Lonnie, do you want to tell us a little bit about that budget amendment?
So this is kind of standard. It's, when the year ends, the auditors come in, they do a, kind of a year-end adjustments and stuff, and with those adjustments, we can end up with some of our funds being negative. So a budget amendment just, allocates increasing the funds that are negative by an increase in revenue to offset, those funds. So as I told our admin committee earlier today, the general fund, there's a GASB 68 adjustment, which is an auditor adjustment. And it will be funded on the offset of revenues by state on behalf payments. The disaster fund was also one that we didn't budget for, obviously. So on the expenditure side, we have to increase it by that huge amount. But on the revenue side of it, we are being reimbursed by FEMA and state funds from DES. And then the remaining funds will be funded by existing reserves. Terry did point out in the line item for the police retirement fund, I added some extra zeros and a dot. So I will.
I didn't think it was like $3 million. Wow.
So, yeah, so I will fix that, those two extra zeros and a dot.
Thank you.
Your vote is for T-Truck.
Thank you, Lonnie.
Yep.
May I have a motion?
I'll move to approve.
Can I ask a question?
We'll have a
Just
discussion.
wait the motion.
I'll move to approve budget amendment or resolution number 3615, budget amendment resolution amending appropriations and reserves for various funds for the fiscal year 2022.
Second.
Thank you.
And yes,
Discussion. Terry?
So I have a question, and again, it's because I'm not maybe as familiar with the budget, but the expenditure for the solid waste fund of 24,000, so what was that for?
So that was, on my part, on the expenditure part, when we did the initial budget, I didn't factor in the total amount that we were gonna be charged for for the Republic Services, for our contract. I didn't figure it in the actual budget, the correct amount, so that's why it was.
Our waste disposal contract increases every year.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
So I'm just curious, so for that large item, the disaster fund, we're gonna be reimbursed by FEMA, but are there any impacts or, what does that, are there any implications for like backups or delays and how are we managing through that?
So the disaster fund is just, one that we just continue to have to budget for, because the projects are gonna take forever, but we just have to carry forward. The way it works in our system, it's due from other governments, so it's just,
So there's notation, but I'm just trying to understand if if that causes a choke point in spending money on something else before there's a reimbursement?
Not usually, no. Right, and if that comes to a point, then yeah, we will definitely bring it to council, but as of right now, we're okay, and like I said, we, are gonna be submitting for our emergency fund, for all of the stuff that we've already paid out and stuff, so those are gonna be reimbursed.
The project itself, yeah.
Thank you, Lonnie. I have one more question.
Terry?
So just so I understand, so where the relocations or additions, where does the money come from? Is there like a special line item of extra money that we?
No, it's just, there's just the source of revenues. So like when you create the budget, you have your expenditures and you have your revenues that you have to match everything. So, with a budget amendment, you're increasing your revenues to match the increase in your, but it doesn't, technically it doesn't hit cash. It just is your numbers for your budget.
So where do you take away to put into these things?
You increase the revenue. That's stated by an offset of increase in the revenue.
Any further discussion or question? All right, roll call.
Battle?
Yes.
Fratelli?
Yes.
Durbin?
Yes.
Eaton?
Yes.
Ronnie?
Yes.
Whistler?
Yes.
Thank you. Next up is ordinance 959, solid waste management system, including recycling. And it's up for discussion, so who would like to introduce that? Teresa?
Well, first I'd like to say this isn't really an introduction of the ordinance at this point. This should have been maybe more properly listed as a discussion about taking back the recycling center. There is, however, some work in the background with the group effort to draft an ordinance that would come forward in the future for the purpose of opening that public discussion in the hearing. So there is an ordinance 959 being drafted for the purpose of introducing that discussion.
So would you like to proceed with the discussion, or would you like to?
Oh,
postpone
definitely
until-
proceed with the discussion. I just wanted to clear up some confusion, because there was a question earlier today during the Public Works Standing Committee about this ordinance.
So,
Oh, I'm sorry, and Jody, I know, I promised Jody I would explain why, well, this ordinance would create a solid waste management system for the city of Red Lodge, and it would incorporate, the information about both our services that we contract for solid waste collection and disposal, as well as establishing a recycling center. So that's why it's in the future, and that's not what we're discussing tonight, other than, what it means for the city to take back the recycling center.
thank you. Any questions? Terry?
I have a question. Is somebody going to do kind of an overview of what's planned for this, for like what's the operating procedures, or how is this going to be structured? Or what you're envisioning with the, with this budget and, the $6 per person or whatever per month? Can we just have some sort of background on that?
Yes, so you're specifically talking about the recycling center
Yeah.
right now and not the solid waste management system. Yes, so the admin committee's been working on that, and I believe we are gonna talk about comparing fee mechanisms for the recycling center during our admin and finance, but we can do it now.
Sure, if you want to.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Okay.
And then we can.
So essentially, again, Teresa's point, there is no draft ordinance yet because that's coming down the pike. But the reason why we're talking about that now is because in order to have this conversation about the recycling center, we had to have a draft ordinance to talk about too. So, a number of months ago, this committee voted to explore the option of taking back the recycling center under city service. And the admin committee was tasked with looking at fee structures and what that might look like. And so in your packet,
what we did was compare two fee mechanisms for the recycling center. So, and that's based on also the budget that you have there, which is a draft budget, that Lonnie helped us put together based on the income and expenses, that the nonprofit, the Recycle Red Lodge nonprofit, had provided for us for their operating over the last 3 or 4 years. And the assumptions we are making when you look at this, comparing the fee mechanisms, the assumptions we are making is that in order to cover the expenses of running the recycling center, it would cost $6 per resident per month. So looking at that, there are 2 different ways that we could, that the council could explore in terms of implementing that fee. So one is a tax assessment. So similar to every single resident being charged for waste disposal in this community, you would have a separate tax assessment that would be billed 2 times a year. It would come with your tax bill, and you'd be billed at the same time as the fees for waste management. So the recycling center would be under city management. If we did this, the recycling center would be under city management the next fiscal year, so starting July 2023. Residents of unincorporated areas would pay drop-off fees for using the recycling center, and property owners would be responsible for the fee because they're the ones that receive the tax bill. The other option for collecting this money would be, or the other fee mechanisms would be putting this fee on the monthly water bill. So if we did that, it'd be billed monthly at $6 a month at the same time as fees for water and sewer. The recycling center could be under city management with a fiscal year 2022-2023 budget revision, so we could basically implement that fairly quickly. Residents of unincorporated subdivisions receiving city water services would be included in the monthly fees. And property owners, again, would be responsible for the fee. So this is just a way to kind of compare what these 2 funding structures would look like. Again, that $6 a month is based on what the current expenditures are that the recycling center, or that the nonprofit is experiencing now for current hours of operation. We did include, Lonnie helped us include an increase in a little bit of hours with the idea that we would try to provide, well, 2 things. 1, provide more hours for the community, but 2, also provide the employee with benefits. So that would be 30 hours per week in order to be eligible for those benefits. So that benefit package, along with 30 hours per week, along with a part-time admin position, which the recycling nonprofit suggested that we do, and would be under Gabby's role, is all included in that budget. And then also, Pete made a good point during our initial discussions about we needed to be able to operate the center and be able to swirl some money away, not a lot, but some money away for when the equipment eventually is going to need repair or regular maintenance and that kind of thing. And so the $6 per person or per resident under either one of these fee structures would cover those expenses. And it would be, we would have a separate account, right, Lonnie? We'd have a separate account set aside so that whatever extra money we collected would be specifically for recycling center maintenance and improvement.
Right.
Enterprise fund, right? It would be in an enterprise fund. So the reason why we're talking about this now is so that City Council has an opportunity to tell the admin committee what other information do you need in order to actually look at this ordinance and decide whether or not we want to take the recycling center back under city services. And so it's also an opportunity to provide this information to the public and give you a chance to also ask questions.
And so, Jen, I know that the one last thing I think to tidy up and complete an ordinance, just so we can bring it forward to a discussion. And this, I understand, this is our opportunity to say, what are we comfortable with adding to that ordinance, right? How do we want to do this? And so I was a little bit surprised today to learn that, you know, we went down the path of thinking it would be in the tax assessment because people could then apply for some relief on that. And then I heard today that that is not true any longer.
No, we
Or-
all agreed on the committee to let the 6 of us decide whether it'll be on the tax assessment or monthly.
Okay. No, what I'm saying, Pete, is that that's new information to me, that
And this
there
is
is
why we're
not
discussing
an,
it now.
no, that there is not an allowance is what is new to me, that they can't apply, they wouldn't be eligible for tax, a
Right,
relief
so-
on that
Right.
assessment.
I'll just confirm, yeah, it is my understanding that at the fees, so for the fees for waste disposal, what we pay for Republic Services, and also this fee would not be eligible for tax relief in the same way that low-income folks could apply for tax relief on the other parts of their tax bill.
And that's a point in favor of the assessment, for the 6 of us to decide, assessment versus monthly.
Assessment versus water bill. I
Water
guess,
bill,
right?
yeah,
Yeah.
monthly.
Right, okay.
Yep.
Thanks.
Yeah. So I just wanted to get back to my original question, which is about the operating procedures. So, because when I look at this, just from my experience working at Recycling Center, we only have 2 staff working, and I know one's an administrator, and, so are we confident that we would just have the guy that runs the forklift or Kyle being the only one manning the recycling center? Or are you thinking there's gonna be volunteers, or is Beartooth Industries?
Beartooth Industries is also, a contract for Beartooth Industries is also written into that.
And where is
It's
that?
under purchase services.
So
So
what,
it's a contract.
okay, so the purchase services, 41,600, what's included in that? Because I imagine it's not all
So-
Beartooth Industries.
I didn't do it. Well, I can-
Usually purchase services is, I'm just going through, there's, right, so I consolidated when I went through what Recycle Red Lodge's one.
Uh-huh.
And we sat down and we went through it, and some things it wouldn't carry forward, but Beartooth Industries contract is considered, is in there, so I think they have in here 14,400.
Is it correct to assume like because I saw a couple things, like the recycling works for like the glass.
So contracts are usually purchase services. So if you go through what they had, that would be considered, that's where the 41,600.
So I'm just making a suggestion, because I know this is the initial discussion. It'd be really nice if we had that broken down a little more so we can
Perfect.
understand what's in there. And then again, back to the operating procedures so that people are aware what days are gonna be open, what the hours are, and, you know, that whole thing. So if this is a presentation would be really helpful.
Any other information that council would need?
I have a question, but I put a snack in my mouth.
It's peanut butter, so be careful.
Okay, sorry.
Yeah.
So under, under the monthly water bill option, it says residents of unincorporated subdivisions receiving city water services will be included in the monthly fee. But they are not included on the tax assessment side.
Correct, because they're unincorporated.
So I'm assuming that, so that means there would be, I mean, theoretically, more people.
We had actually, it should be $5 on the water and sewer bill, not $6.
Okay, that's what I was gonna say, is like, if there's more people on this monthly water bill, theoretically, more people putting money into the pot, so to speak, of, you know, the fee mechanism for the recycling center, then it would, I mean, it seems like it should be less
I don't
money
think
per-
it's significant. Go ahead.
per month
So
than,
but I was also gonna mention that, so when we discuss both sides of it. So if we go the water and sewer route,
mm-hmm,
then are we going to charge extra fees for commercial? Because, well, then we're gonna have to separate out the commercial one. The way that it is currently with our waste services is it's only residential. So then the business owners and commercial ones, they would pay a membership fee.
And the invoice or.
And
Which is included in this budget that we came up with.
And I did put a note here, businesses,
Will
we
pay a
had talked
membership.
about the 40 businesses or so right now that are currently on members of the nonprofit membership structure that, the admin folks decided that, you know, while we can't have it as a membership structure for everybody, because that, managing that administratively would be too cost prohibitive, we could do the 40 businesses, at $300 a year. And so the commercial aspect would be covered that way regardless of what structure we select.
Did we not discuss also that if they didn't want to do that, they could do a $10 drop off?
Yes, we did.
Okay.
But there are currently 40 businesses that pay $300 a year.
Correct.
Yeah.
And that is written into the budget that
Yeah.
we produced.
So if it was on the tax assessment, well, either way, businesses wouldn't be,
Right, either way,
Assessed.
businesses are not being assessed.
The service area of, Remington and, what's it called? Woodlands, they're already incorporated in our water service.
In the sewer service.
Sewer.
So could we cover that through water fees then? I mean, would that,
I think it's either one way or the other.
okay.
Yeah, I don't, you guys know.
So we need to decide, because that's something we really need to plan into the ordinance, is how we provide for the service to people outside of the city limits, or are they extended? So it really does matter, just for the wording of the ordinance, you know, we need data.
So then, if we thought about, it seems like if we're for recycling, which is a really good thing, what about people that live outside that have memberships? We're kind of pulling the rug out from underneath them, right?
So the memberships are annual or biannual anyway, and so we give them plenty of time to say, essentially, they'd still be able to use the service. It would be a drop-off fee.
Yeah, which is a lot more for, you know.
yeah, it's a lot more.
It's a lot, I mean, I'm just
$10
saying,
per
if
time.
we're trying to promote recycling, it's sort of de-incentivizes
Right,
them.
$5 per
that.
time, it's
You know what I mean,
$10
by
per business.
not having a membership for them, for the people out, because there's quite, how many, I never get, what's the number of people outside the Red Lodge that participate? Quite a few, I thought, isn't there?
I'm not sure if Gina provided those, but I will get that information, number of people currently using from outside the county. We do have, I know
Outside the
that
city.
they, or outside the city, sorry. I do know that they have addresses for everybody. I guess what I would say is, regardless of how it's currently being operated and who gets to use it, the city needs to consider the nonprofit is dissolving. And if we want to have recycling, how can we do it in a way that's sustainable for the city? And the one thing that we are clear on is that running it as a membership-based service is gonna have too much overhead. And so we have to, I recognize that that's gonna impact some people, but it, you know, the idea is what kind of compromises can we make to ensure that we still have recycling in this community?
Yeah, and one of the important factors here is that a lot of towns throughout the state, they're just throwing up their hands and saying, we're not gonna do it anymore. And I don't think we should do that. I think we should work through this and keep the recycling center alive.
I agree. I think what it means to me is that everything that gets recycled and pushed off there, down there, offsets the amount that is in our landfill, what is collected and transported to a landfill ultimately. And, you know, we've adopted the Sustainability Environmental Conservation Plan, and it's doing the right thing, and it's offsetting the amount of garbage and waste that would go into the standard landfill volume, right? So that's one thing, and then beyond that, it's also doing the right thing to offset our carbon emissions.
And just to tie a bow on that, the third piece I would say is economically, what we know is every 5 years we have to renegotiate for solid waste removal from this community. And because we're at the end of the line, I mean, we pay a lot. And every 5 years, our, the contracts or the proposals that come in are higher and higher and higher. And if this community has a recycling center to help reduce the number of trucks of our waste that are leaving, then we have a leveraging tool when it comes to negotiating our next contract. And I think that, that is, at the end of the day, you might pay a $6 tax assessment or, twice a year, you might pay $36 every 6 months. But at the end of the day, if that $36 is helping us keep the cost of your waste disposal from going up every year, then overall it's a good for the community. So just to move along, what I hear the council saying, you want broken down purchase services, you want what the hours of operation would be, and like what the service could,
Operation procedures.
yeah, drop off for businesses, what that would look like, and drop off in general, how people outside the city limits are going to access services and get the number of people outside the city limits currently using via membership. Okay.
One more thing I think just to consider, because I think all the points have been really good, but I think the one that sticks with me is the one Teresa just made, which is keeping stuff out of the landfill. And then I think of walking through the alleys in Red Lodge, there are businesses that throw a lot of cardboard in there. And so I know that it's going to be voluntary for them, but is there some way we could look at least certain industries that have a lot of cardboard, having them toe the line and recycle as well? So I don't know if it's practical, but
Either persuade or put it in the ordinance.
Okay.
I guess we have.
just something to consider.
Yeah.
Thank you, everybody. That was very helpful.
All right. Next up is standing committees. First is administration and finance. Who's going to
That's me talking a lot. We mostly talked about this. We discussed the budget amendment resolution that council just passed. Thank you. We had a presentation by a representative from TextMyGov on their text communication system for municipalities, and that was great. I really appreciate Lonnie setting that up for us. It's an opportunity for the city to have another avenue for direct communication with residents, and I imagine that one of these days soon we'll put something together so that council can have a similar presentation. We did talk about the draft 959 ordinance. We reviewed the fee structure spreadsheet that I just went over. We talked about the capacity needs in the admin department, and I think I just want to share with council and the community that the admin department is currently undergoing a hiring process, and they are conducting interviews. We know that there are some capacity needs within the admin department. We know there are some, documents and minutes and things that haven't yet made it to the website. This new hire is, that's going to be part of their job description. So I would just say, please be patient and understand that the admin department's working really hard to increase their capacity. So then the last couple of things we talked about were next steps for kind of looking at business registration fees, and then talking about city insurance fees and the fact that they're quite high, and we might want to look into getting some quotes from other entities that could provide that for us. So those were the things we talked about.
Thank you. Any questions for the admin and finance committee? All right. And I'll just remind those of you in attendance that you're more than welcome to come to any of these meetings. They're held the same day that council meetings are held, and the schedule should be available online. And you can always call City Hall if you have any questions about details. So next up is Public Works. Who's the Terry?
So Public Works, first I want to thank Lonnie and team for, after my persistent begging, putting up the meeting minutes, because it's been really helpful to share between the committee members and also with the public. So thank you for that extra effort. We really appreciate it. So one of the things that our group does is Jim has a capital improvements project that he works on, and we do an update, and Jim is nice enough to come and spend an hour with us and correct everything, which is changing at warp speed every 2 weeks, and so that is going to be published along with the meeting minutes up on the website. Most of the main updates that we did today were covered by Jim earlier when he did his flood update. So the other thing I wanted to do, because Pete brought this up, and I think we all agree that, you know, the person who probably has one of those difficult jobs here is Jim. And he and his staff have been working really hard and trying to work with our committee. They've had the flood and a lot of other projects simultaneously, but he always tries to save the taxpayers' money, and he always tries to do things so that he doesn't have to redo and tear up what he just did. So thank you for that. And then we were doing, I just want to give an update on some of the action items we have looking at events that we had, that the noise law enforcement signs that we had secured from MDOT. Jim has them, but obviously has things more important right now to do. But he said he'll get them up there in the spring before we start a big tourist season, so that's good. The other thing was we did pass on the internal checklist for the fire department and police department with the help of Chief Schrock. So we thank you, and then that's going to be for consideration to be rolled into the new to the application process if it's, when it's updated. And that's it for Public Works.
Thank you. Public Health, any comments or questions for Public Works Committee? All right, Public Health and Safety.
That's me.
Okay. All right.
Okay. So nobody here likes to write, so I got nominated. Okay, so the one thing I do is I go to the Red Lodge Rural Fire District update. That happens once a month. I just wanted to mention one thing that pertains kind of to City Council is that Tim Ryan is working really hard to do inspections of the short-term rentals. And so I guess Courtney gave him, or somebody gave him a long list of 90 things to do. And so he said he can do about 3 a day. So he's going to work through those. And anyway, he's trying to work through that. The other thing that they said was that they're reviewing all their fee structures, and I believe for the ambulance and for inspections. So just know that they're going through that cycle, so we may see some increases. So just kind of a heads up. The other thing is our committee was talking about, we had a lot of things that we talked about doing with the help of Chief Schrock, and then we said, okay, we need to prioritize. So thanks to the ladies here for helping us prioritize. So one of the things we said was really important, again, is this whole grant opportunities that are associated with funding a resource officer and an enforcement officer through COPS and OJP. That'll start taking place in Q1 of next year. Enforcement is a systematic and overlaps with land use. So Jen and Kelly are addressing to determine what needs to be done in preparation as far as data collecting and reporting. So we'll stay tuned for that. And then the other thing we're going to look at, and this is kind of Teresa's thing, is looking at ordinances that need updating, which will involve pulling up relevant municipal codes and reconciling. So the ones we thought we'd first focus on, and Chief Schrock agreed on this, is we're looking at fireworks, animals, and then motorized and non-motorized personal mobility devices. And then another really important one that was pointed out was parking, but that's going to be TBD once we get through these. So that's it.
Any questions for Public Health and Safety or issues you'd like to have addressed? All right, next up is Land Use and Planning.
So for land use and planning, Shelley, Jen, and myself met today. We're joined by Heather and Quinn in the audience, along with John Satan and the mayor. We went through our most immediate items. A couple of them were soon to put to rest. But as the mayor mentioned, the North Entrance URD board, we need to have yet another person at the very least on that board. So we talked about that and getting that to move along. We also talked about the emergency housing situation, and Heather Quinn had offered that she's been, offering information about, people that might be interested in offering, or, rentals of rooms, long-term rentals, short-term rentals, or possibly financing motorhomes or mobile homes or something like that. I don't know the details, but it sounds like we need to secure that line of communication that doesn't seem to go anywhere. So I'll be reaching out to Eric Allen again to see if there's some connection that we're missing, or that there might be a better place for that information to get channeled. And then, I also learned from Eric Allen that, I think it's NDES, it might be MDES, but, there is a movement afoot, around providing some emergency housing, but I don't have any details yet. I think that's a really new thing. Thanks to our pestering, so maybe that community forum with a lot of us joining in will make a difference, hopefully. And then that's it for emergency housing. There really wasn't anything else for the city to follow up on at this point. And then there is the startup of the short-term rental advisory committee, and Jen has been appointed to that on our standing committee, and as liaison to the city, she'll be attending that. And she's reported that will start this Thursday at 5:30 at City Hall.
And there is a Zoom link or a GoToMeeting link for those that want to join virtually.
Thank you. And then, again, a higher priority for our standing committee. There's a lot of overlap between public health and safety and looking into those COPS grants. And so the additional action that Jen and Kelly took on was to meet up with each other and see what they think the focus of those grants should be before there is that other meeting that was recommended. So that's shaping up. And then we did discuss, and this is something I haven't really formulated and shared with the rest of council yet, but we were looking at ordinance 893, which is our land use ordinance, basically, for the city, and decided that, you know, there's a lot more focus on everybody looking at the applications and how we compare to Whitefish and Fort Benton. So we thought that, you know, at the same time, we're looking at ordinance 893 and some of the glaring things that need to be updated versus the applications, that possibly every one of the standing committees could take a swag at revising those and then sharing them amongst ourselves at the same time that we're looking at 893, because that might suggest what we also need to address that might be missing or needs to be updated in our ordinance. So I'll try to put it better in an email and send that out to everybody, let you know what we're after there, but that was basically our discussion. And then we did have a couple really good comments from John Clayton in the audience, and he brought up the desire to revisit the trail or sidewalk, something along 78, that he says he has been talking to Courtney about. So Courtney will be reaching out to you. And then Kelly volunteered to call MDT and see what it would take to get a traffic study or something in the way of some type of an assessment that helps us to understand how big and costly a project that may or may not be. And then there's other sources of funding or grants that we could also go after. But we've got the beginnings of some good work ahead of us to see if there's anything to be done about completing that sidewalk and trail. And then he also brought up our opportunity as a city to express and convey to the state the desire to have a sidewalk along the 19th Street Bridge, similar to what is done for the 13th Street Bridge, especially if we do end up developing a park that ties into Rotary and there's a lot more foot traffic potential, you know, across that bridge. But this would be our big chance to convey that. So that's what John brought to our attention today. And I think we can try to figure out how to convey that to the state as they're in the middle of forming these what-if scenarios and the projects. That's all we had really for today.
Thank you, Teresa.
Sorry.
Okay, no, that was great. Does anybody have any questions or comments for Teresa and the Land Use and Planning Committee? All right, well, that brings us to correspondence, and if there is any, then it will be in your packet. And with that, we can have a motion to adjourn.
I move to adjourn.
All right, meeting adjourned.